Imagine for a moment there was no money. You just produced stuff or you worked and like you exchanged that directly for things you wanted. So like instead of like getting a salary or selling something and then with that money just buying something else, you just like directly change something that you have, exchange something that you have for something that you want. So like you have a cow and I want milk and I want to eat beef and I have a couple of chickens here, so I'll just like give you the chickens and you give me the cow and we'll call it evens and no money is necessary, right? So let's suppose no one ever invented money and we gradually somehow developed a very uh, advanced society and all that. Do you think in that society any president, any economist, any politician would ever say something like, we're sending out too few chickens and getting in too many cows. We should send out more chickens and get in fewer cows. Or in a more modern approach, maybe. Uh, we've been getting like 10 cars for every 6 cars that we sell, for every 6 cars that we give them, and that's not good. That's not good. We should be giving them 10 cars and getting 6 back. China's terrible. China produces cars really, really cheaply, and like they send it all over here. And now we have a bunch of cars and a bunch of toasters and a bunch of computers, and we're only sending them like a couple dozen phones or something, and like 2 dozen services, and that's it. Like that is so unfair. The Chinese, they're taking advantage of us. You know what we should do? We should produce all those cars here and then send them there instead. And instead of getting 10 cars for every 6 that we send, we gotta send 10 cars for every 6 that we receive. And so instead of receiving or having 10 cars here, you'd have 6. I don't think like if you just take money out of the equation, you see how clearly stupid it is. But that's exactly what happens. Like having a unfavorable trade balance or a trade deficit means sending out more money and getting more stuff for that money than like stuff that you're actually like sending out. You're sending out less stuff and you're getting in more stuff. You're sending out more money, but money doesn't mean anything. Like US dollars or euros or Australian dollars, they're only good insofar as they can allow people from abroad to buy things from those respective countries. Like people abroad only are only willing to sell things to Americans in US dollars because they can get those US dollars and use them to buy something else. Normally, in the end, from other Americans because America is the land where dollars are actually used. And so, like, they're still going to be using that to buy something from us, to buy something from the US, or to buy something from someone else who would buy it from the US, regardless. Why would we want it to stop? Let's say the Japanese, they subsidize car production and they make cars really cheap. And then we can buy cars really cheap at half the price of what we can buy normally, of what we can produce. Why? How? How is that a bad thing? It's the most uncontroversial economic statement ever that you should want to get more things for the things that you give. That you should want to be able to produce 1 car or 2 cars or give out 1 chicken and get like 10 cows back. Like that's the greatest deal ever. But somehow we call it a unfavorable trade balance. What we call it, what do we call it again? Uh, a trading deficit. What's the deficit? You're getting more stuff. Getting more stuff is a deficit. It makes absolutely no sense. And this is really funny because what we say now about China is exactly what we said about Japan. We say we said Japan is undervaluing their currency so that they can sell us more stuff for cheap and get stronger industries. And now we're saying the same thing about China, like exactly the same thing. But the problem is, how did that work out for Japan? Japan hasn't been growing for 30 years. They inflated their economy, they got into debt, they financed a bunch of stuff, and now, sure, they have like great car companies, but the average Japanese earns what, a third of what the average American earns? and their economy hasn't grown in 30 years, and they have a fertility crisis. And like that's exactly what's happening to China now. What's happening to China now is they're pretty much entrapped in a middle income or lower middle income, to be honest, and they can't get out because they won't be free. They won't be let themselves get out. They've enacted stupid policies for decades. Obviously, they're less stupid than what they had before, so they grew a lot. But like China isn't rich because it financed its industries for the last 30 years. It's relatively rich because before those 30 years, it was absolutely terrible. It's just absolutely like dictatorial, let's call it that. And so China, if it doesn't change, and it probably won't, is just going to end up like Japan. It's forecasted now that the population in China is going to halve, and economic development is already kind of going down. It was at 8, 10, 9, 12%, and now it's at what, 5%? It's going to keep lowering. It's never going to get to the US levels, and even though they have 3 times or 4 times the US population, and they're going to be a Japan 2.0, something that kind of scared Americans for a decade or so there, and then they were irrelevant. Like, I mean, never really irrelevant because they're still big and relevant and like dictatorial, and they have nukes and all that. But economically, factories are already moving out. They're going to Vietnam. They're going to, I don't know, Indonesia. They're going to Brazil. They're going to India because it's not sustainable to just lower your prices for everything. At one point, you're going to get rich. Your population is going to get rich, and you're going to no longer be the cheapest labor on the market, and you survive that, you get rich despite of that by doing what the US does, which is having actual freedom. And I don't mean just trade freedom, even though the US is a relatively free trade nation. And I don't even mean like just economic freedom, but like just general freedom of speech, freedom of ideas. The reason the Chinese can't innovate, the reason they don't have a Silicon Valley, the reason they don't have as many technology companies as the US is because you can't freely articulate ideas there. And like in that environment, you're never going to innovate as much as you will in an environment like, I don't know, Southern California or like the Silicon Valley or like Austin or like Florida or whatever. And the fact that nowadays the right wing is calling all of this bullshit and is saying, no, we got to have more tariffs. We got to trade less. We got to send more stuff than we get in. Like, who the fuck do you vote for then? Like, well, the party's completely flipped in that sense, you know. And obviously, I don't want to defend the Democrats in any way because, like, they're literally only against tariffs because Trump's for them. Like before 2016, when Trump started talking about TPP and whatever, they were still in favor of tariffs. So like, it's just like stupidity across the board, and you don't even know what to do anymore because everyone's just terrible. Everyone's just saying very very stupid shit. And so I wanted to show you guys. I think this is probably going to be the main thing of the video. Look at this image right here. If it's red, pretty much the country's poor. The GDP per capita is low. If it's green, especially like lush, dark green, then the country is really wealthy and rich. And you can see that Africa naturally mostly poor. South America, South Asia, most of Asia, just to be general, and then even like Southern Europe is less rich than Northern Europe. There's nothing like different about this graph, but what might be impressive is this one here, and this is countries by their average tariffs. Obviously, it's complicated. It's a complicated measure to have because like tariffs are like you have different tariffs on different products on different countries, and obviously this is an average. This is an estimate, let's call it. But do you notice anything at all? Like, do you see how even the lighter parts of Africa are darker than the US and Europe and Australia? You see how South Asia has like a lot of tariffs, how Brazil, Argentina, Venezuela have a lot of tariffs, how even Russia, China, Mongolia, they have a lot of tariffs. You know what all those countries have in common? They're poor. And Australia, New Zealand, the US, Canada, Europe in general, the UK, the quote unquote good countries, like what they have That like what they all have in common, they don't have like taxes in common. Some of them have high taxes, some of them have low taxes. For example, Singapore has low taxes. Dubai has low taxes. They're both really wealthy. Obviously, America has mid to mid low taxes, whereas I don't know, Italy and France and Germany and Denmark, they have really, really high taxes. So like there's very few correlations that you can make between every single rich country in the world. But one correlation that you can make is that literally every single country in the world right now that's minimally rich is very, very low on tariffs, at least proportionally. And you think that is a coincidence? That's not a coincidence. That's exactly why. Protectionism doesn't work. It has never worked and it won't work for the US, for Brazil, for China, for Russia, for the UK, for Europe. Customs unions are stupid. The EU should abolish its custom union, let everyone trade freely with whatever country they wanted. The US should lower their tariffs, hopefully to zero. It's a useless, stupid concept that only does one thing: it raises prices to consumers, and not by forcing other companies to pay tariffs, because other countries and other companies don't pay tariffs. It's the importers, the U.S. companies, the domestic companies. They're paying the tariffs. They're passing that into the consumers, and the consumers are being able to buy less. That's it. That's all that's happening. I'll see you guys around.